Sometime in the thinning light of a winter evening, an old man stepped out of his car and felt the world quiet around him in a way that echoed through the deepest chambers of his life. Snow sifted across the broken stones of the long-abandoned estate, catching on the edges of his coat as he closed the door behind him. 81-year-old Javin Pike didn't come here to remember anything. He came because he believed there was nowhere else left to go. His children's voices had faded over the years until silence felt more familiar than love, until even his brass pocket watch seemed to understand him by refusing to tick past the moment time had stopped meaning anything at all. Now, standing before the mansion his grandparents once cherished, Javin carried only a red suitcase and the hope that work, real work, might quiet the ache he couldn't outrun. The house towered over him, its shattered windows staring like hollow eyes, its front door hanging open in weary surrender. But as he stepped across the threshold, breath fogging in the cold air, the vast ruin around him felt less like an ending and more like the first hard step of something that might matter. He set the suitcase down. The wind sighed through the rafters, and in that haunted quiet, he decided this forgotten place would be his final attempt to build a life worth returning to. The mornings became rituals carved from frost and exhaustion. Javin rose from a sleeping bag on the kitchen floor, joints aching, breath a pale ghost swirling upward through the cracks. He worked room by room, sweeping debris, patching plaster, scrubbing away decades of grime until the marble beneath his weary hands gleamed with stubborn resilience. And as he labored, the ghosts of the house slowly revealed themselves. In a hidden drawer he found a bundle of wartime letters written by Samuel Whitmore to his wife, Eleanor, notes filled with fear, longing, and hope carved into paper just thin enough to tremble. Their son James had died overseas at 19. Their remaining son drifted west, and grief, heavy and quiet, pulled the Whitmores apart until their home became a mausoleum for the life they'd lost. Reading their words, Javin felt a mirror held up to his own story, not identical but parallel in all the ways that mattered. He realized then that people didn't abandon homes or family out of coldness. They drifted because sorrow softened their courage over time. So he kept working, believing that fixing the broken bones of this house might mend something within him too. With each nail driven and each wall scrubbed clean, he felt the faintest possibility that loneliness didn't have to be permanent. Not if he kept moving. By the third week, the town began to notice the old man resurrecting a mansion they'd long considered a lost cause. At the hardware store, Martha Chen eyed him with the blunt skepticism of someone who'd outlived every excuse. She walked him through aisles of supplies, her voice sharp but her advice careful, and when she realized he was truly working alone, she invited him to her house on Thursdays for soup. It was the first kindness he'd been shown in months, warm broth served in a cluttered kitchen, steam rising like memory itself as she listened without demanding explanations. Later came Pete Harrigan, a weathered handyman with calloused hands and a quiet grief of his own. He agreed to help with the failing roof, showing up with a toolbox and a silent understanding reserved for men who had lost things they never learned how to name. Together they patched wood, replaced beams, fought winter itself. And with each day, Javin felt the world acknowledging him again, not as a burden, but as a man who still mattered. Evenings were spent writing letters he wasn't brave enough to send to his children, imagining conversations that collapsed under their own weight before they reached paper. Still, he kept them folded neatly on the kitchen table, 3 white envelopes like lanterns waiting for a spark he wasn't sure he deserved. For the first time in years, the silence around him no longer felt empty. It felt expectant. Spring arrived like a soft exhale, revealing life hidden beneath winter's grip. Snow melted into the earth, and the gardens, wild and tangled, began surrendering their secrets. Beneath rotted leaves were stone paths, rose bushes still clinging to life, and the bronze dinner bell half buried like a fossil of forgotten joy. When Javin polished it and hung it on the porch, the first ring rippled across the valley with a sound so clear it felt like a heartbeat returning. The town heard it. Volunteers began appearing at the end of the drive. A young couple eager to help restore the gardens, a retired contractor offering advice, townspeople delivering seedlings descended from the very flowers Whitmore once planted. And slowly the mansion transformed, not into its former grandeur, but into something humbler and more beautiful. Community grew around Javin like an unexpected season. He laughed again. He planned again. He cooked Aliner's apple cake from a recipe he found hidden between pantry boards, the scent of cinnamon filling the kitchen she once stood in. And for the first time in years, he felt he was building not only rooms but possibility. Late at night, he mailed the letters he'd rewritten, each holding an invitation to a summer solstice garden party, an offering, an apology, a distant hope that maybe love like this house could still come home. The day he checked the rusted mailbox, everything changed. Inside, buried beneath junk mail, was Sarah's letter, sent months earlier, forwarded from his old address, written in a trembling hand. She'd tried to reach him. She needed him. Her marriage was unraveling, her life boiling over, and she'd been calling a phone that no longer worked, begging for a voice that never answered. Javin's guilt crashed over him like a storm. He called immediately. Her voicemail answered with the familiar tone he'd missed more than he admitted. Margaret picked up next, her voice sharp with worry and hurt. Daniel called soon after, furious and relieved in equal measure. Only then did he understand the truth. They hadn't abandoned him. He had vanished without meaning to. His silence had terrified them. His disappearance had wounded them. In trying not to burden his children, he had become the very absence they'd feared. That night he sat with Martha and Pete, confessing mistakes in a voice splintered by regret. And with their urging, he wrote new letters, letters honest about fear, about loneliness, about the aching, stumbling attempt to fix what he'd broken. He invited his children again, this time not as an apology, but as a promise. I'm trying to rebuild something real. If you come, the door will be open. June arrived with heat settling gently over the gardens like a blessing. All around the estate, life unfolded in colors Alina herself might have recognized. Roses bloomed, lanterns lined the walkways, and the conservatory, once shattered and skeletal, now shimmered with restored glass that caught the light like a cathedral of summer. Volunteers came daily. Music teachers strung instruments for the party. Neighbors brought recipes passed down through generations. And Javin worked beside them with a purpose deeper than restoration. Each swing of the hammer felt like an attempt to heal his children's silent distance. Each scrubbed tile felt like a prayer that they might find their way back. When Pete's daughter Emily arrived, after 2 years of silence, and embraced her father in the garden, Javin felt a quiet ache bloom inside him. If they could mend themselves, maybe his family could too. Nights were spent writing updated invitations, slipping photographs of their restored childhood estate inside each one. He placed 3 small stones in his pocket, one for each child, remembering the superstition his late wife had taught him. Carry a stone for someone you love and they'll find their way home. Whether or not magic was real didn't matter. Belief was enough. The summer solstice dawned golden and warm, draping the mansion in a gentle glow. Volunteers filled the property with final touches, tablecloths smoothed, food set out, musicians tuning beneath the old oak tree. By mid-afternoon, nearly 50 townspeople had gathered, their voices blending with birdsong and the distant hum of the pond. But as Javin stood on the porch with the bell rope in his trembling hand, his heart was split between gratitude and a quiet grief. His phone remained silent. He feared his children would not come. Still, he rang the bell, its clear voice echoing across the valley, calling the world home. Applause rose, music swelled, and he walked through the gardens accepting embraces from strangers who had become something close to family. Then tires crunched on gravel. 3 cars appeared between the stone pillars. Sarah stepped out first, tears already streaking her face. Margaret followed, her carefully polished composure cracking. Daniel came last, lifting a small boy with dark hair, Javin's grandson, James. As they climbed the steps, all hesitation dissolved. Sarah fell into his arms. Margaret joined her. Daniel's voice shook as he whispered. He wanted to meet his grandpa. And as little James studied him with wide eyes, the years of silence melted in the fading summer light. For the first time in a long time, Javin felt whole. That night, after the party faded into warm lantern glow and laughter drifted softly through the conservatory, Javin sat with his children in the heart of the home he'd rebuilt. They spoke honestly, about fear, about distance, about all the ways they'd each been carrying wounds they mistook for indifference. And as little James played with the wooden train carved decades before another boy's life was cut short, the past and present seemed to breathe together. Later, Javin stepped outside and rang the dinner bell one final time. No, not as a call into the valley, but as a quiet promise to himself that this place, rebuilt by many hands, would never again stand silent. When he returned indoors, his children were laughing in the kitchen. Eliner's recipes spread across the counter, warmth rising from every corner of the home that had almost been lost. For the first time since he arrived, Javin felt something deeper than hope. He felt belonging. And as the night settled around the estate, he whispered a quiet truth into the air. Some broken things can be made whole again, not perfect, not unchanged, but whole enough to matter. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support brings more stories to life than you know. And now tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it right now as this story finds you?